Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is intended solely for the purpose of personal growth and not as a replacement for professional psychological support. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests of this show are not meant to be taken as medical advice. It is very important to seek the help of a qualified medical practitioner when making any shifts to psychiatric medication you may be taking, or if you are experiencing extreme psychological distress.
Welcome to The Drummer and the Great Mountain, a podcast where we share effective tips and practices for working with adult ADD, ADHD in a natural, effective way without the use of medications. Each episode, join me, your host, Batman Saram, along with the author of The Drummer and the Great Mountain, Michael Joseph Ferguson. Join Michael and myself in an interactive discussion of sharing our stories as we journey together in transforming what can be the gift of being what we call hunter types. This podcast is intended to be your audio companion to the book written by Michael, who joins me each episode where we both will strive to foster dialogue, give you our personal insights, and share both of our experiences on this similar path that we are all on. Our intention and hope is that along with the book, this podcast gives you an additional perspective as you listen to us delve deeper into each chapter of the book to give you even more tools to go along with what it is that you are reading. Visit us at drummerandthegreatmountain.com to purchase the book and look for more tools, tips, and updates, as well as giving us feedback on this podcast. Join our growing global community of creative types, entrepreneurs, and out-of-the-box thinkers on our shared journey. Welcome to The Drummer and the Great Mountain podcast.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Michael Joseph Ferguson. How are you doing? On today's podcast, we're going to be discussing the topic of journaling, and specifically journaling for clarity, for just getting clear about what you need to do, maybe what feelings are alive, what actions can be taken to make your life better. And we'll be specifically talking about journaling utilizing the principles of nonviolent communication, also known as NVC, which was developed by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. It's a very, very useful tool to have in your toolkit. And we've discussed this numerous times. I wrote about it at length in the Navigating Emotions chapter in the book. We've had on two guests that we've discussed it with. One was Leo Sofer, who's a storyteller and a good friend of mine. He's the one that introduced me to it. We also had David Steele. He came on and discussed NVC a bit. He's the co-founder of the Rocky Mountain Compassionate Communication Network. So you can go back to the archives and listen to both of those to get a little bit more of a background. But specifically today, we'll be going through a simple 4-step journaling process to help you get clear. I feel like having a simple process to go through, so you're not just sitting down blank with a piece of paper or your computer, not knowing having no strategy of getting clear about what you need to do. I feel like this 4-step process can be really, really helpful to you. So stay tuned for that. Just a couple quick announcements. Number one is we've been referencing a lot of Audible titles for a while of audiobooks to check out. So if you're interested, you can get 2 free audiobooks in a free 30-day trial through Audible by going to drummerandthegreatmountain.com/audible. That's drummerandthegreatmountain.com/audible. You can get 2 free audiobooks if you haven't taken advantage of something like that in the last year on Audible. And then if you want, you can cancel before the 30 days are up and you won't have to pay a thing, and you get 2 free audiobooks. So check it out. And specifically, today we'll be talking about nonviolent communication, and there's a really great audiobook read by the author, the late Marshall Rosenberg. who came up with the process. So I would encourage you to use that coupon and go to Audible, find that audiobook. It's excellent. It's such a good companion to this podcast we're about to do. So check that out, drummerandthegreatmountain.com/audible. And number 2, if you haven't already, I would encourage you to pick up my latest free ebook, which is ADHD Time Management. You can get that on Kindle /Amazon. So if you just go to Amazon and type in ADHD Time Management, you'll see it there. You can get it on iBooks. Just do a search for ADHD Time Management, or on Google Play. I also have it on Kobo. So pick that up. That is the rewrite of the time management chapter in Drummer and the Great Mountain. And a couple of new things in there. So if you haven't already, I know a lot of you have already checked it out, and we actually got quite a bit of traction on Amazon because it jumped up so quickly because all of you went out and downloaded it at the same time. So I was really pleased to see that. So if you haven't already, pick that up. Okay, so let's talk about journaling. Now, for me, journaling has been one of the essential tools in my toolkit. I use it constantly, and for many, many years, I used it as my primary tool for getting clear, for getting out of overwhelm. I just can't express how useful of a tool it is if you know how to use it well. So let's start with the challenges. Let's talk about why you would even want to journal in the first place. So number 1 is overwhelm. That is the constant companion of hunter types, is dealing with overwhelm. So journaling, check the box, completely supports getting out of overwhelm. 2, anxiety, another huge challenge for many of us hunter types. So once again, being able to journal and get clear is going to help you get out of anxiety and get into a better headspace so you can take some actions that you need to take. 3 is the more exaggerated version of that is meltdown. So especially after a meltdown, whatever that looks like to you, everyone's got one. Everyone's got the classic meltdown that they go through from time to time, and some of us even more often. Processing through what happened, how it could have been handled differently next time, what led up to it. Once again, journaling can be super helpful for getting clear about how to get out of a meltdown, how to change the trajectory moving forward after that. Another key one is obsessive thoughts. So another real common hunter type thing where you have just thought going over and over and over again, and you can't get yourself out of it. Journaling can be super helpful in stopping the gears, getting yourself clear about what needs were alive that are maybe trying to be met through the obsessive thought. That can be a really helpful tool. Journaling can be a helpful tool in getting clear and stopping the train. Another thing is it brings empowerment. It brings self-empowerment. If you have no one to talk to and you really need to recenter yourself, then journaling really just gives you that tool of autonomy. So you can use this tool to get clear when you may not have support around you. And if you get good at it, then it just gives you that extra freedom that you can, you've got this tool. And if you do it on a regular basis, you'll find that you'll have a shorthand of how you get to clarity. And the more you do it, the quicker you'll become as you start to get your process in place. And today we'll be talking about, I think, a pretty good structure to start with, and then you can take it from there. So there's a couple key components we need to discuss before we get into the 4-step process. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to be talking about principles centering around the nonviolent communication process, developed by Marshall Rosenberg. I just can't stress, I just watched it in action so many times and I've utilized so many of the principles that I just have to say, it's just such a good tool. He kind of worked out just how we work. And it's one of those things when you just test it out and you utilize it, you'll see for yourself whether or not it works. But from my experience, I've watched it both in groups and one-on-one, along with just using it as a journaling tool for myself. And it gives you something to hold on to. So one of the first topics that I think needs to be discussed, and we'll be using this phrase, and you've heard me use this phrase before, is needs. So needs is a concept that's sort of vague and I think if you're not clear about what needs are, or how I'm actually referring to needs, then all this may sound a little mercurial. So we have to go in and define what we're talking about in terms of needs. So as I was developing and mapping out this podcast today, I was reading back through the Navigating Emotions chapter, and I think I just want to read straight from that. I almost never read straight from the book, but I feel like this was pretty well put. So this is from page 120 in the Navigating Emotions chapter of Drummer in the Great Mountain, talking about needs. From the dawn of time, all humans have been motivated by the same basic needs. Needs, in fact, are the life force itself, brushing up against us, moving us to take action in the world. Needs are both primal and universal. They are every human being's baseline operating system. No matter your race, belief system, or what language you speak, all humans share the same needs. In relation to our emotional life, needs are the least common denominator. In a sense, they can be considered atomic, meaning, which is a Greek word meaning that which cannot be divided into smaller pieces. Needs are the interface point between our emotions and the life force, and there's only a finite number of them. So I think when I remember writing that thinking, okay, that's clear. I think I got to the core of that. Basically, when we're clear about a need and we can name it and say, this is what's not being met in this moment, there's a physiological shift in our body. We can feel our body go, that's it. And to me, that was really surprising as I started working with nonviolent communication, is when you touch a need and you name it, your body says, it relaxes because it's like, yes, that's the thing I've been trying to get your attention about. So again, these seem to be wired into our psyche, and we seem to be driven by these core needs. So I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. So once again, going to the book, this is page 123, also in the Navigating Emotions chapter. I'm just going to pick a few needs here just to give you a flavor of what we're talking about. So needs could be things like safety, they could be trust, choice, autonomy, awareness, order, acceptance, appreciation, understanding, listening, authenticity, growth, challenge, discovery, harmony. These are just a few needs to think about. And there's a list here of about, I don't know, I think there's probably about 40 or 50 needs there. And these are sort of universal, like every human being has these needs. There's a finite number of them. So at the end of this podcast, I'm going to let you know about the free download for this podcast, where I'm going to put together a PDF that has the needs list as well as the 4-step process. So you'll be able to go through and reference that as you're going through and practicing the journaling process we're going to talk about. So if you're obsessing on a thought and you find yourself spinning over and over again on a thought, chances are there's a clear need or a set of needs that are attached to that thought that are not getting met in the moment. So knowing which needs are unmet can provide you with clarity on what actions you can take to get greater peace of mind, relief, and just give you a way forward. So to me, that's the crucial piece here, is that without an awareness of needs, you're still kind of lost at sea. Whereas needs really give you something to point at and go, that's what I need. And we'll go through some examples a little bit later. So that's needs. Moving on to feelings or emotions. These are, well, we all know what they are, like anger, frustration, happiness, joy. These are all the different colors of life, these emotional experiences that we have. And there's infinite number of feelings. They can be very subtle, different colors of human experience. And what I like about Marshall Rosenberg's approach, is he says that feelings are like the lights on the dashboard telling you whether or not a need is met or unmet. And I just keep trying to prove that wrong, but it just seems to be the case that when you feel happy and joyful or peaceful, that there's an underlying need or set of needs that are really met in that moment. Whereas if you're feeling anger and frustration or confusion, again, there's a set of underlying needs that are being unmet. And when you can get to the core of, okay, you name the needs, you've got a finite number of them, your body will tell you when you stumble upon one. Then the next step is taking an action. What action can you take to move towards getting those needs met? And to me, it really takes a lot of the guesswork and the mercurialness of our emotions and gives it something to work with, a good, solid tool to work with. So that's feelings, and that's pretty obvious. I think most everyone can understand feelings. Also, there's the biochemical component, which we talk about. I talk about ad nauseum on this podcast. And specifically, your mood is going to be affected. So whatever's going on in the moment, if you're spinning on something, you're feeling some heavy emotions. There's usually two neurotransmitters that are connected to our emotions. One is dopamine, the other is serotonin. So dopamine, as we talked about on this podcast, is connected to focus, motivation, and learning, whereas serotonin contributes to your overall well-being. So if you have any offsets and things like areas where that brain chemistry has been through whatever means has been altered, or you're feeling off, or you're not getting, there could be a nutritional component. There's just sort of the baseline wiring that we have as hunter types, where we tend to be, especially with dopamine, tend to have a challenge with focus, motivation, and learning. In certain situations, then these will attach to a thought. And so often there's a biochemical component where you're being challenged in that way. Then it'll exaggerate feelings. So if you're feeling off, those days where you get up and you're just off. And, so whatever your thoughts are that are often generating the emotions, they will be exaggerated. But oftentimes, even in those spaces where you're feeling really off, the things and the thoughts that are arising in your head typically are still connected to unmet needs. And it may just be a more exaggerated form. But there again, the tool of journaling can be helpful in at least getting yourself clear. Often there's a need for rest or just taking better care of yourself physically. There's going to be some needs underneath that will even contribute to your You might have a couple ideas of what could help you biochemically. We talk about exercise, nutrition, and good nutrition. Those are things that could potentially help you when you're down in the dumps. So the other thing is, if you practice meditation for a while, you'll notice that you'll start witnessing your thoughts, and you'll notice that the repetitive thoughts are actually causing the suffering itself. It's the thought going over and over again. If you can start to meditate and become a witness, you can start to just have a little more traction so that the thoughts are not the 100% of your consciousness. You start to develop a sense of watcher. You become the watcher of your thoughts. And so this part of it, you start to see that there is actually a differentiation between that awareness that you are and the thoughts themselves. And as you start to cultivate that, it gets a little easier then to journal and to do some of these processes, because you're not 100% engaged in whatever the thought is. You're not 100% identified with it. So in talking about journaling, I think it's important to highlight the power of meditation to get you to that place. So just wanted to note those couple pieces going into journaling. So in talking about journaling, once again, what we're talking about here is a tool that can help you get clear, that can build your self-awareness, can contribute to your self-empowerment, and supporting your emotional autonomy. Especially when you have challenges with your significant other, it's a really good tool in getting clear before you say something that you'll later regret. So it's also one of those like fail safe. You can pull it and go, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to journal, and possibly prevent a major meltdown that you're dragging someone else into, or to continue to argue on something instead of taking a moment, sitting down, journaling, getting clear about your thoughts, and then potentially having a clearer approach to how to articulate what you need to articulate. So again, that's another key piece to journaling that I think it's important to highlight. So just a couple quick notes on nonviolent communication, developed by Marshall Rosenberg, primarily as a conflict resolution tool. And primarily what we're talking about is he wanted to come up with a tool that would give us, like, how do you articulate yourself to another human being in a way that does not trigger them and keep you both from getting your needs met. So the goal of NVC is to have a language of communication that supports both needs, or the people involved, that everyone gets their needs met. And that was the intention that Marshall came into it with. And the term nonviolent communication, I think, needs to be clarified a little bit. When he talked about nonviolence, he was referring specifically to Mahatma Gandhi's concept of ahimsa, which is a Hindu principle. And basically that is the respect for all living things and avoidance of violence towards others. That was the basic concept for nonviolent communication. He wanted to understand how we could communicate with each other so that we can all get our needs met, versus continue down the road of punishment and then punish the other person back. And then it just cycles and cycles and cycles. And in doing so, I think he unlocked some really crucial pieces on how our psyche works. So that's why, as he went down this road of developing this process and then exposing many people to it and watching what worked and what didn't work and tweaking it and adjusting it, he really worked out how our emotional bodies work. So it has been put into practice for many years. I think he started in the late 60s, and it continues to this day through groups and facilitators. So that is sort of the background of nonviolent communication. Okay, so let's get into the process, and let's start with the tools that you will need. So there's a couple options that I would suggest. One is a notebook or a journal. Obviously, if you're journaling, you think of, okay, I have a journal, but I want to be a little more specific about that. So one option is you just get a notebook or a journal. What I like is a blank journal that does not have lines in it. I prefer that. You may not. The one that I like is I use a 5x8 spiral bound sketchbook. And the one I have is by Strathmore. It's a all recycled paper sketchbook. It's got good paper in it, and it's just blank, and you can pick it up at your local art supply store. I will leave a link in the description to the Amazon link so you can pick it up there if you like. So that's one option. Or just any kind of journal, or you can use, as we talked about with time management, you could use a planner that has blank note pages in the back. That's often what I recommend if you're going to do a paper-based planner as you schedule your life. Then having a bunch of note pages in the background, in the back of your planner, could be the best way to go. So basically, you just go to a blank page. Or find maybe you got half a page written, and then you go to that page. That's the last page that you've written in, and then you just write the date and then start writing from there. If you've got the notebook or journal, then once again, you just go to a blank page, write the date, and start your process. The third option is the computer, laptop, iPhone, iPad option. This is the one I prefer. I prefer using my laptop or my desktop computer because I can write. I can type quicker than I can physically write, but I will also physically write things as well. So if you're using a computer or a laptop for your journaling, then you've got a couple options. One is you could use one long single file that you just continue to build up and build up and build up over time. So basically you just call it journal, you write the date, you start journaling, get to the end of that section. If you come back and you want to journal again, then you just scroll to the bottom, write the date, and then start going again. That way you have just one long continuous document. That's one way to go. The other, and this is the way I use it, I just create the file name as the date. So I have my folder called journal, and inside that I have a bunch of different documents, and they're just named by the date. That way I don't have to think about, okay, is this a journal? I want to get into it really quick. So I don't want to think too much about it. So I know my directive is write the date, save it, and start writing. So that's another way to go. If you have an iPhone or a tablet, then you might want to use the stock Notes app and just use a single file format and just put the new date in, scroll down, and start typing. I would say do that only if you have to. It's probably the most cumbersome of all the different options, unless you can type really fast using the touch screen. If you can, great. Otherwise, I would explore some of those other options. I really like the notebook as far as its portability, the paper notebook, the spiral bound notebook. If you're questioning what to do, I would say go there first. But a close second, I would say, would be like a laptop, so that you can actually sit down and you've got a decent keyboard and you can write things out that way. Okay, so now let's talk about the process. So once you've got your whatever tool you're going to be using to journal, you're going to go through these 4 steps. So step 1 is to ask yourself, what's alive? What's alive in me in this moment? So typically what I'll do is I'll sit down at my journal and I'll just write what's alive ? And so that's your cue to basically start writing an unedited, unfiltered version of what you're experiencing in the moment. So this is sort of just non-edit. Don't try to formulate a process. Just get it out. Whatever you're feeling, see if you can get in touch with just whatever. If you're frustrated or overwhelmed, sometimes you just write, I'm overwhelmed. That's what I often do. And then I'll make a list of things that are overwhelming to me in the moment. It's a non-structured part 1 of this process. So just write what's alive and just let it fly. Whatever's alive. If you're angry at someone, just write out exactly how you're feeling in that moment. Whatever it is, just see if you can get in touch with the life force itself in the moment flowing through you, whether it's if you're happy, then obviously there's a lot of times you won't journal because there's no need to. So most of the time there's some challenge that has arisen. So the more you can just get in touch with what you're feeling in that moment and write it, that's what we're looking for in step 1. Ask yourself, what's alive? So once you've gone through that, number 2 is part 2 is getting clear and sort of refining it a little bit. So part 2 is, what are the main feelings that you're experiencing right now? So part 2 may be you're angry or you're frustrated or you're overwhelmed or whatever the feelings are. See if you can just write those out. So you might just write 1, what's alive, write whatever that is, write 2, and then then just write feelings, and then just write the feelings. And then it's pretty simple, straightforward. What are the feelings that are alive in that moment? 3 is what needs are not being met. This is the crucial piece of the puzzle. What needs are not being met? So if you go to drummerintheGreatMountain.com/episode 65, you'll be able to download a PDF of the needs list as well as these 4 steps. And that's what you can reference as you're memorizing or just starting to get familiar with a needs list that you can name and pick. And basically what I want you to do is look at the list. And as you've kind of gotten clear about what feelings are alive, then you go through the list and you say, okay, what need or needs are most alive in this moment? And so if you just read through the list, you'll land on a couple where you'll go, that. And when your body tells you, trust your body will go, oh yeah, that one. Write that need out and go through the list. There might be a couple of them, and I'll give you some examples in a second, but write out what needs are not being met in the moment. So that's where this is really where you have to have the list in front of you to get clear about it. And then over time, you'll start to memorize it and it'll get easier. So that's number 3. And so you might want to print that out, fold it in half, put it in your journal, have it with you somewhere, have it on your computer so you can bring it up if you're journaling on your computer. So number 3 is what needs are unmet. And so again, you might just write 3. What needs are unmet ? And then start writing. And then 4 is what actions can you take to meet these needs or this need or needs. So basically, now that you've identified the needs, what actions can you take in this moment or schedule for yourself to get those needs met? And again, I'll give you some examples of this in a second, but that's part 4. And that's a key piece of the puzzle. So just getting clear about what needs are alive is great. That's a key step. But if you're not going to take any action towards meeting the need, your body is going to continue to in your brain, and your whole being is going to continue to yell at you with whatever the obsessive thought is or whatever it is that you're emotionally experiencing in the moment. It hasn't gotten your attention enough to where you're listening and saying, I will take an action towards getting this need met. Because that's kind of what, from my analysis of my own being and watching other, especially doing coaching, there's always needs that are arising. And then when you start to take steps towards meeting those needs, even if it doesn't quite meet the need, if just the action of taking a step towards getting that need met, that tends to calm those emotions down. It calms the mental spin down. And so you're able to take action then, and then you start to test it out. Did this meet the need? Maybe, maybe not. But at least you're moving forward and you're taking action instead of just staying in the conceptual realm, which is only helpful, I think, if you're giving yourself some kind of self-empathy. So the action potentially could be giving yourself some empathy in the moment where you're journaling and giving yourself some understanding. But even that's an action. Even that's not just staying in your head. That's actually sitting down and writing. And that's still an action that you're taking to get a need met. So those are the 4 steps. Step 1, ask yourself what's alive. Step 2, what are the main feelings? Step 3, what needs are unmet? And 4, what action or actions can you take to meet that need or needs? Okay, so that's the process. Let's go through some examples. So let's start with step 1. So maybe as you sit down and you write what's alive, you're writing, oh, there's so much going on. I got this coming up. This is too much. So maybe that's sort of when you just do step 1, which is what's alive, you're just like, you start to get it, maybe you list a few things that are on your plate. Then you go to step 2, which is what are the main feelings? And you're like, okay, that's easy. Overwhelm, anxiety, confusion. Got it. That's clear. 3, what needs are unmet in this moment? So as you go through the needs list, you pick out clarity, order, simplicity, and ease. Say those are the 4 that you're like, those are the big ones. Those are the ones I'm really wanting right now. It's the thing you're wanting. You can think of needs as like, what is it I'm most wanting in the moment? Clarity, order, simplicity, ease. Those are the ones that when you went to the list and you did the gut check, those are the ones that really stood out. So now you go to action. So 4 would be some potential actions you could take to meet those needs. And so you might write, okay, 1 is I could write out a list of items and prioritize. Okay, 2 is I can be more specific and maybe I can write out the top 3 things that I absolutely need to do in this moment. So that kind of just starts to clear the plate and get you clear about, okay, I know that it's actually these 3 things I need to do right now. Or you might say mind map. That might be part of like, okay, that's what I need to do. I need to sit and do a mind map and get clear and then prioritize from there. So those are all potential actions you can take to get clarity, to meet the need for clarity, order, simplicity, and ease. Or you might write down and call your partner, call your companion and say, look, I need to just talk through this. I'm kind of spinning right now. Can I just talk through this for a few minutes and help me get clear? So that's a really key. If you have people in your life you can do that with, then that's a really good resource to utilize. If they're open for it and they know how to support you, then that might be another way to go about it. So that would be the 4-step process, going from what's alive, what are the main feelings, what are the unmet needs, then to potential actions. And what you'll find, I predict, is when you have this kind of structure to work with when you're journaling, it'll start to get easier and easier, and you'll start to get quicker on, okay, I know what actions I need to take. But going through those steps gives you a greater like emotional resolution. It's like you going from like a TV that has really low resolution and everything's kind of fuzzy to really getting a crisp, high definition image of your emotions, like what's going on with you in the moment. This kind of process can be really supportive for that. So that's an example of like how you would utilize overwhelm. Like if you're in overwhelm, that's one way that you'd go through the process. So let's explore another one. So let's say you're at work and there's something you're really excited about and you're talking to a coworker, or maybe you're talking to a friend, and they criticized an idea that you came up with and kind of dismissed it. So that's something we've all experienced before. And then what tends to happen, depending on the type of hunter type you are, some people will attack back. But more often than not, we internalize it and we just feel frustration. And maybe there's a mix between self-judgment and anger at that other person. That's a real common one that I think all humans go through, and hunter types, I think, go through that a lot as well. So let's take that one. So let's say it's an hour or two later and you're just spinning on either self-judgment or anger at that other person, or both. So you sit down and you write step one, what's alive? So you write out, okay, this is what happened, blah, 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 blah. You get clear about the experience itself. This is the observation step in nonviolent communication, where you really try to get clear about what happened. That might be a really helpful tool to think in terms of what's alive. You might even make that even clearer, like what specifically happened. You don't have to do that, but that would be more of a classic NVC step one. Once you've kind of gotten that out in your frustrations or whatever you're feeling in that moment, step two is, what are the main feelings that you're experiencing in that moment? And that might be anger, and it might be anger, sadness. You may feel deflated. That might be a really specific feeling you might write out. So those might be some of the feelings involved in that interaction and the thoughts that are spinning in your head on that. And then you get to the needs. And so what are the needs that are alive? And as you go through the list, you come up with support, encouragement, care. So maybe the languaging that they used did not meet your need for care and support and encouragement. And so because you didn't get those needs met, you felt, oh. So when you touch those needs, you're like, yes, that's what I wanted in that moment. When I shared that with my friend or my coworker, I really wanted to get support, care, encouragement out of that interaction, and you didn't get it. So then finally, like, what action? So part 4 is what actions you could take to work on that. Like what would be an action to meet the need for support, care, and encouragement? So there might be a few of them. One, you might say, okay, I just really need to talk this through with someone else just to get clear on it. So that might be one of the actions you could take. Another action, you could give yourself some self-empathy in that moment of just writing out, gosh, that was almost like you're stepping outside yourself for a second and saying, that really sucked that I just shared that and that person just totally shot it down. That was what a crappy experience to go through. Just giving yourself the empathy for the experience. And often, even though that sounds kind of pretentious, our emotional self really likes that kind of inner dialogue. It gives us a sense of like, oh yeah, just a little understanding in that moment of like, that was pretty awful. And just that alone, just touching that can be enough to get ourselves out of the spin. And then hopefully if you get to that place where you get a little traction on it, you might feel a sense of like, oh, wow, that person, whatever is going on inside that person must be pretty bad, because, that's a pretty harsh comment, and that person may not be the happiest person in the world themselves if they're going through the world with a lot of cynicism. So if you can get to that place, then you can kind of regain your sense of self-esteem and you can move on from the experience instead of holding on to the anger. Now, another action could be that you may have to have a conversation with that person and say, hey, when you said this, I just didn't appreciate it. And having a dialogue about it, not blaming them, but just having a communication where you feel comfortable as a human being to have a conflict with another person without just either internalizing it or just abject anger towards that person. You can have a communication and maybe they would be, whoa, they're like, wow, I didn't even realize that happened. And wow, I'm sorry that I didn't realize that would have affected you in that way. And you can have a conversation about it. So when we do we have these kinds of interactions with other people, it's educational if we do it well, where we don't just project onto them the anger, and also perhaps there's anger for all the times that has happened to you, and so you're projecting it all onto that one person, even they're like maybe a fraction of all the other people that have done that to you in the past. So if you can come at it where you've diffused it in yourself a little bit, and you can have a calm interaction with that person and let them know that maybe you would have appreciated you could maybe articulate, hey, maybe you could have handled it this way. It opens up a dialogue. Both people can grow out of the experience. And instead of it just turning into internalization or projecting out at that other person. So that would be a classic nonviolent communication example. I think that's kind of what Marshall Rosenberg was aiming for when he was working on this kind of dialogue, is how do you have those kinds of interactions with other people where you can fully express yourself without feeling like you're making that other person wrong. So you're open to their experience of the situation. And both can be, everyone can grow from the experience. So obviously does it always happen? That's difficult. That's probably the hardest action to do in that list. But there's also the piece of just being able to stand up for yourself and have be willing to have a communication with someone else. Instead, if you're someone especially who's adverse to conflict, then it could be a healthy thing for you to have a communication and move through it. And then what I found, because I've had to go through that myself, when I set boundaries with people, where people have said something where I felt like either they stepped over a boundary or they shared something that their reaction was not something that I appreciated, I was able to, if I had the interaction with them and I talked to them about it, I found that I didn't have the obsessive internal thoughts of like, I'm wrong or I'm bad or I'm really angry at that person. Like it quiets down that spin because I stood up for myself. And so that was sort of what my psyche was wanting me to do in that moment, was not just to stuff it, but to actually have a communication without it turning into a fight. And this is where the tool of nonviolent communication, if you go deep into it, can be so useful. So this is more as a journaling tool, not necessarily as a tool for dialoguing with another person. It's just about your relationship with yourself, going through this tool to help you get clear about what's going on and what actions you can take. So that would be another example. Another real common example would be just loneliness. So you may be spending a lot of time alone, and you feel like maybe a sense of sadness or depression or disconnection. And so you write that out, and you might write, I'm feeling, I don't feel like I really have a lot of friends right now. And I'm just feeling, and then as you get clear about, so the step one would just be kind of getting clear about the condition. Maybe just like, I just feel awful right now, blah, 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 blah. And then step two would be, what are the main feelings? And you may say, loneliness, sadness, disconnection. And then you get to the needs. Okay, step three, what are the needs that are unmet? Connection, companionship, community. Those are the ones that may jump out to you. And then step four is like, what actions can you take? So that one's pretty clear, because it's clear that there's a need for connection. So one, you could say, okay, I want to make a list of people to reach out to. So who are some people that I haven't talked to in a while? Maybe I can schedule a phone call or plan to hang out with them next week. That kind of thing could be really helpful in that situation. So I would say that's probably number one. If you're wanting community to address that need, you might want to look at like what group you could, do some, maybe the action is do some research on groups that I can join nearby, or do some volunteering and research that. So those are types of actions that would specifically meet the needs for connection, companionship, and community. So, if you're feeling lonely and sad because you're not meeting the need for connection, and then you feel like you're broken because of it, I would question whether or not you're honoring your emotional intelligence. Your body is smart. It knows when needs are unmet, and it's giving you a communication through the sadness, through the feeling of disconnection, that there's needs that are not met that would make your life more wonderful if you had those needs met. That's sort of the beautiful gift of this work, is you start to have more of a capacity to take the actions necessary to meet needs. And that's just by definition going to make your life more wonderful. Because if you're not going through this process, then these needs just float around and you have these feelings that come through, but you're not actually taking the next step and taking action towards meeting the needs. So again, like for loneliness, this is a really good tool to go through. And it's pretty clear in those situations, like what actions can you take to make connection? What's keeping you from doing it, which is often the case. With ADHD and hunter types, we tend to be social awkwardness is sometimes, and social anxiety comes up. I know I have that a lot. I have to really push through that sometimes. But I also know that when I do, I'm rewarded for it. So the sensitivity and all the things that come with being a hunter type can often lead to us not getting certain needs met. And so we have to be a little more proactive in terms of getting needs for connection, companionship, community met. And also I want to add to that, because this is sort of my life coaching piece, not just leaning on your significant other, if you have one, to get all of your needs met for connection, that you actually have friends and you have people in your life that you're leaning on, as well as your significant other, for those needs for connection. And then it just makes your life more full, and it also often contributes to the relationship. So that's just this little side note on that. So another benefit of going through this process. Okay, so let's take one more example. So let's say you're sitting at your job and you just feel awful. And as you write step 1, what's alive, you say, just this job, I hate this job, I hate what I'm doing. And you just go into that for a while. And then step 2, you write, what are the main feelings? And then you connect with sad, depressed, stuck, lost. Those are the feelings that are alive. Then you go to step 3, what needs are unmet, and you write meaning and purpose. And you write them in, like if you're writing on a piece of paper, you're writing them, you're almost like cutting into the paper. You're so like passionate. When you read through that list, those are the 2 that really jumped out, meaning and purpose. Again, this is a real common one. So once you get to that, it's probably already going to feel good to even just touch those. Like, that's what I'm wanting. And then you go to step 4 is what potential actions can you take? What actions can you take? And this could be this is also pretty simple. So like, what can you do to explore other options for work? That could be step 1. Like that might be one key action you can take, is just taking the time to research and check what other jobs are available. What else can you do? Another action could be doing volunteer work. Again, you're looking at meaning and purpose. So volunteer work, volunteering, connecting, reaching out and connecting with other people can meet the need for meaning and purpose while you're doing your current job. So it's a need that's unmet, and it doesn't necessarily have to be met by the thing that's making you money. Ideally it is. That would be the ideal scenario, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So again, exploring volunteering and other ways you can get meaning and purpose met could be other actions that you might write down. Another action could be reaching out to someone else to help you get clear, finding support. Maybe it's researching a life coach so that you can sit down and talk to them about it and say, okay, getting a little extra support on transitioning out of your current job, or just getting clear about other ways that you can meet these needs. Those are 3 or 4 actions that you could take to meet the needs for meaning and purpose. So those are some examples of the process. And I think as you're listening, you can hear the value in being able to do this. A couple notes is this takes a little while, so don't expect to just have this mastered right away. You want to practice it and just taking that first step of just getting in the habit of writing what's alive is a really good first step. But if you can just keep the process in front of you of writing down those 4 steps, what's alive, what are the main feelings, what are the unmet needs, and what potential actions you can take. If you just stick with those and keep repeating that process over and over again, I predict your life will get better just because most of us never do this. Most of us never actually go that granular with what's alive in us. And I can say as a life coach and working, I would say needs-based awareness is at the core of the work that I do, that just going through and taking people through this process on a regular basis, it's transformative. And it's nothing I'm doing other than creating a container for it. It's just having that personal awareness can make big shifts very quickly. So don't underestimate the power of journaling as a tool to really transform your life. So those are some examples. Again, I want to offer the free download will have the needs list as well as these 4 steps on it. So again, go to drummerinthegreatmountain.com/episode 65, and that'll give you the needs list and the 4 steps. And you will need that going forward as well as the tools that we discussed in doing the journaling itself. And then if you got those tools, then it's just a practice of continually revisiting that. So a couple things you might want to say every day around like after lunch, that you sit down and you just go through this process. It becomes just a part of your daily routine. That's one way to go. Another way is just to do it when you're triggered, when you're feeling lost, then just pull the tool out and say, I'm going to use this as my tool of getting back to center again. So that's another way to do it. There's no right or wrong way to do it. If you have the self-discipline and you find the benefit of it, I would recommend that midday check-in. I find that's a really good time to do it. When I've watched coaching clients go through this process, that's a good time of day because usually you've started the day, you had stuff that was on your mind. It's usually not the best to do in the morning unless you really have a fairly quiet schedule. But most of us will take a break for lunch. And before going into the next part of your day, you can kind of clear the slate, get clear about, do an internal check-in through this process, and that will give you some leverage going into the afternoon. So that would be one time to do it. You may want to do it in the evening before bed. That's another time to do it. Either way, my challenge to you is over the next week, get your journal in place, however you're going to do it, and aim for 3 times in the next week. Do this process 3 times within the next week. And I would encourage you, find if it works for you and you found it helpful, hop on to Facebook, go to the post for this podcast and reply to it. And I would love to hear your experience with it. So if you found this process useful, please respond to the post on Facebook. I would love to hear from you. And if you'd like to learn more about nonviolent communication, or NVC, go to www.cnvc.org. That's cnvc.org, as in the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And there may be a study group nearby. That's what I would recommend. If you're really getting into this, I would recommend the audiobook, which I'll mention in a second, or pick up the physical book, which is just essential. And there's also a workbook that they make as well. And there also may be a study group nearby. So I would say go to cnvc.org. And I was looking through the website. It was a little confusing how to get to the practice groups in your area. But if you want to find a practice group, which are usually by donation, go to cnvc.org. Under the tab that says Learn NVC, click on Find NVC Training. And then once you get to that page, click the tab that says Practice Groups, and then select your area on the right, and that'll let you know whether or not there's an NVC practice group in your area. Or just Google the name of your town with NVC, and that also may give you a group there. I've noticed that there's a lot of groups that are not being listed on the website. So if you just type in NVC, like Portland or whatever city you're living in, you'll probably find a list of groups that are available in the area. So that's probably the best way to go deep into the NVC process. Again, I simplified that a bit through what I just went through. There's the process. Classic form of the process is observation, feelings, needs, requests. Those are the 4 steps. So pretty much what I went through is similar, although the observation step 1, I kept it really loose. There's a very specific way that they recommend doing observations, and it takes a little time to get used to that. So I would say listen to the audiobook and ideally find a study group. That's a really great way to go through the process, because typically you will go live with it with other people. And that's really how you learn the process at a deeper level. But at least through what I just mentioned, you're going to get some of the key pieces of the process. Okay, so once again, if you want to get a free audiobook, I would recommend going to drummerandthegreatmountain.com/audible. And you can get the 30-day free trial on Audible, which gives you 2 free audiobooks. And one of those could be the Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. That will give you, that's the whole process that he goes through. And it's good just hearing from Marshall Rosenberg from firsthand. He's really good at describing the process and what motivated him to do it. So I can't recommend it enough. So again, drummerandthegreatmountain.com/audible. That gets you 2 free audiobooks and a 30-day free trial for Audible. That also supports the podcast. So check that out. So I hope that was helpful to you. If you're interested in getting the book, The Drummer in the Great Mountain, a guidebook to transforming adult ADD, ADHD, you can visit drummerinthe.greatmountain.com. You'll also be able to get us on social media there. So the links are at the top for Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also get a searchable list of the podcasts on the podcast page. So you can just type in whatever theme that you're looking for, like time management or navigating emotions or whatever it is that you're looking for. Do a search, see if there's a podcast where we covered that topic. If you're new to the podcast, I've recently put together a 5-day audio mini course. And I'd recommend that you start there to kind of familiarize yourself with some of the concepts we talk about. You can get that through drummerinthe.greatmountain.com/mini course. Reviews are super helpful, and I want to again thank you all so much for taking the time to write reviews and rate the podcast. I just looked there the other day, and I was so pleased to see all of the positive reviews. Thank you so much. So if you enjoy the podcast, consider writing a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening to your podcast from. Book reviews are also super helpful. If you've purchased the book in the past and you've enjoyed it, consider going to Amazon. We've recently put the book up there. You can add a review there. If you haven't picked up the ADHD time management free ebook, I would recommend going to Kindle/Amazon, do a search there. And if you've read the book and you like it, consider writing a review. That would be awesome. If you have an idea for a topic for the podcast, please reach out. I would love to hear from you. You can email us at info@drummerinthe.greatmountain.com. And if you've emailed me recently, be patient. It usually takes me a few weeks to get back to my correspondence, so I promise I will get back to you. If you're interested in life coaching, right now I am currently running a wait list, but I might be opening up some new slots soon. So if you're interested in getting some life coaching, you can visit alivelifecoaching.com and get a feel for what I do. And if you're interested, drop us an email. Like I said, we have a wait list going right now, but we might have some slots opening up. So contact us if you're interested. And what I usually do is I'll set up a free 15-minute conversation so we can just see if it's a good fit and then go from there. So check that out. And until next time, be well.